All right, so what I got in the vise is a black ghost. More specifically, it's the marabou black ghost. It's a little easier to tie as far as setting the wings are concerned, as opposed to the traditional flat wing. Um, Other than that, the pattern's basically the same. So that's what we're going to be tying. The hook that I'm using here is a TMC 300 times 6 long. Traditionally, these were tied on. If I can get this to all line up where I want it. Traditionally, these were tied on. The smallest would be about a 6, and more commonly, probably in 9 times 9 long. I've seen them go as long as like times 11. Although those hooks are hard to find, if you can find them at all. Today. So the thread I'm going to be using is UTC black 70 denier, and we'll just get started. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start my thread behind the eye where I want my head to end. So this front part here is going to be the head, and I'm going to take a couple turns back and I'm going to trim this out. Now on this version, because the marabou is going to fill up the whole shank here, you don't have to worry about the underbody, at least as far as the thread to the hook shank is concerned, quite so much. So you can flatten your thread out and wrap back with touching turns, or you can flatten your thread out and spiral wrap back and just try to keep it evenly spaced till we get to the hook point. And we'll stop. Next what I'm going to do is get some yellow marabou for the tail. What I'm looking for is something a little wispy. It's got nice edge to the marabou. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to clean up the bottom. I'm going to take off all this stuff down here at the bottom. You just got to kind of determine how much or how thick you want the tail. So when I stretch it together like this and place it along the hook shank, it takes up about 1/3 to a half of the distance of the hook gap, so from the bottom part of the shank to the hook point. To make this a little easier to work with, I'm going to dunk this in some water. Don't lick the dyed marabou. The dye is not good for you to lick, as you can imagine. Or you could use a sponge and rub it against the sponge. So what I'm going to do is, now that I've got it wet, I'm just going to draw it through like this until I have my tail. Now I'm going to line this up. I want the tail to be half the distance of the hook shank. So where I have it about where I want it, I'm going to transfer the distance over to my left thumb, left index, and I'm going to place this actually above the barb. I want that tail to start here, not up here. The reason I started up here is so that I can just wrap back into it a little bit, and it helps keep that tail centered right on top, like so. You can place a wrap underneath if you want, if your marabou's kind of funky and likes to fold and pull tight going towards the hook eye, and that'll help keep your tail elevated. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open wrap or spiral wrap back forward with my thread. I want to keep my marabou aligned on top. This is the part where we want to start working to make a nice underbody. So we want to make sure that the proportions are nice. Take your time here. And I like to use even spacing again. This stem is just in my way. Keeps knocking everything around. There we go, that's a little better. And we're going to take this all the way up to where we started. Just before I get to the front, I'm going to trim that off so that it's just about even with my starting point. And when I get to the very front, I'm going to actually cinch this down. And don't be afraid to grab a hold of your hook shank. These longer hooks, they like to, bend, and you can see all the bend that goes in there as I'm wrapping around. All right, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working back. I want to open my thread up, so you're going to twist your thread until it opens up. You can also take your bodkin, line it up on your thread, kind of pull it to you. And you'll see as I do that, or maybe you can see it, but my bobbin is moving and it's opening up. And so what the goal here is to have even pressure. Just get that light a little close. Even pressure as we wrap this back with open turns. And we want this to cover 95% of our yellow up. If you have a little bit that peeks through, that's okay. It's not going to be the end of the world. But we do want to try to get as much of that covered as possible. And so this is the part where you can start the Jeopardy music, because it can take a minute. But it's important to keep this part of the underbody nice, so that you don't have a bunch of lumps and bumps on the underbody for when we add the floss. And let's just keep on rolling. So this underbody is a little bit easier to make nice and keep even, as opposed to with just using hackle fibers. The hackle fibers usually end somewhere in here with a taper, so you're going to have a little bit of a taper, and then to try to get the body even, you got to get a little creative with your thread work. So this way is just a little bit easier, and we will get there. So I'm lifting up and pulling it towards me as I do that. Getting that thread really lined out flat. And when I do that, I don't bother to wind it up, so I'll take some really big turns around the hook shank. And we are almost there. We're going to stop at the hook point again. Practicing this kind of underbody work is great practice for your thread control. And if you want to get into tying more serious salmon flies or the really nice stuff, this kind of thread control is very important. For a fishing fly, not so much. You can just probably wrap forward pretty quickly. You're just not going to have well, I shouldn't say you're not going to, but it's less likely you're going to have the nice underbody and the nice body appeal to the eye as you would otherwise. Okay, and that's good right there. Next, we're going to add the rib, and what I have here is I've cut off about 10 inches or so of silver tinsel. It's silver on one side, gold on the other. This is small tinsel, and I want the silver side to show. So to do that, I want to take the silver side and place it towards the hook shank. I know it seems a little counterintuitive, but when you fold the mylar over, it wants to the inside color that you tied in wants to fold and come back out. So I'm just going to place a couple of wraps in. You can see that it's sticking pretty far forward. I'm going to take it and just adjust it and slide the tinsel until I've got it right where I need it. Now I can finish wrapping this back to the back. Now I've got a clip back here that I'm going to take and use to hold the mylar. And now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to flatten this out. our thread that is. And we are going to wrap forward, trying to cover up all the rest of that yellow marabou that's sticking through. If you don't have black floss, which is what the body is made out of, you can just make the body out of thread. You're just going to need to make several passes. So we've done basically one full wrap back. So if you don't have floss, you're going to come up and back up until that's fully covered. And that helps build the thickness of the body as well. So if you're using like 140 instead of 70 denier, you may not have to put the extra one in. But with 70, it's because the thread's half of 140. You're going to probably want to do that to just help kind of get the body a little thicker. And again, slightly overlaying turns here, really keeping the thread flat, taking your time. Even pressure is key here. Sorry, I get the computer doing some crazy stuff in the background. Keeps it interesting. Okay, we are getting close here. All right. It started to twist up on me. The reason you want to keep it flat is to help keep that underbody smooth. If you get halfway through it and your thread starts to rope back up, it's going to create a little bump in there, which is going to make it real difficult for your floss work, or can. Depends on, I guess, the quality of floss. I'm just going to use some rayon here, but you could use the uni floss as well. I use that quite often. So right as I get about a bodkin width from where I started, what I'm going to do, and I've already pre-cut this, but I'm going to get my floss. Now I've got this at about 30 inches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it around my thread and lift up so that it's on top of the hook shank. And now with one side sticking forward, I'm going to make a few wraps going forward. I'm going to fold the floss over. Get my thread flat again. It really kinked up on me. And I'm going to place about 3 or 4 wraps going back. So now we've got this trapped inside of our thread. Now I'm going to do this in reverse, but if you're doing, it's easier to do this towards you. So when you're flattening this floss out, what you want to do is you want to kind of get them sitting side by side and really pull, gently pull, and you're going to pull all the way until your fingers run through the whole thing. My arms aren't long enough to do it away from me, so I've got to do it towards me, but you'll have the idea. So I'm just going to grab it and pull. And this is to try to help flatten anything out. If you got like workman's hands, right? Your hands are all rough, kind of like sandpaper. For floss work, you may want to get some like latex gloves to do this, because the rough hands will mess up your floss in a hurry. So next I'm going to start wrapping this. We don't want to wrap it too tight. And we basically want to lay this one strand. So I've got my lead strand going to the back. On the back strand, I want to lay over my lead strand from the previous wrap, if that makes sense. So you're kind of crossing it over about 50-50. Once you've got in 4 or 5 wraps, if you have a smooth surface, something like with this, the back of this bodkin that's got a nice wooden handle to it, or a bodkin that doesn't have any glue or anything, it needs to be really smooth, no nicks or nothing, anything like that. Or a piece of glass, or like a round piece of glass. We want to use this to burnish the fly. And so I'm going to hold my floss in the down position. I'm going to loosen the tension up just a little bit, and I'm going to gently rub the floss. And then what this does is it pushes it around and helps fill in any little bumps that I may have there, like valleys and dips and bumps and all that stuff. So I'll typically do three to five, maybe 7 if it's going real well, and then I'll stop and kind of burnish it a little bit just to help get any of those out. Now you probably can't see what I'm seeing on camera, but I do have a few little ones here that I want to just try to make nice. Good practice. So I got one right there I don't like at all. But you gotta, to do this, you really need to kind of loosen the tension just a little bit. Uh-oh, my thread got stuck in my bobbin. Not split way apart. That's gonna happen. Okay. Now when we get to the back, I'm stuck on my clip. Somehow my floss got knotted at the bottom, so it's catching stuff now. Once we get to the back, which we're almost there, we're just going to take this, reverse it, and bring it forward. And we'll tie it off in the front. So as I get close to my tail, loosen up. Pull it over. As I get to my tail here, I'm going to do just a straight turn over. And I like to do a second to build this back part up just a fuzz, and now bring this part forward. Well, I'm getting my floss fouled up and everything tonight. Uh-oh. It's just catching on all kinds of stuff. There we go. Catching the bobbin, catching hooks, catching my material clip. It's just catching everything. Alright, now I'm back in business, I think. Or for how long, right? And you want to try to keep it the same tension going back and forth. If you find yourself in a position where you have like an extra little valley in there, loosen your turn on that particular part to help. It'll help open up your thread or your floss. If you have a part that's got the little hilltop to it, that part you may want to tighten your wrap to get it as snug as possible to help alleviate that, or at least hide it as much as possible. You may not be able to get it out 100%. See some people that have some just super nice floss body work. A lot of the times that is done with silk. And silk is just a very nice product to do a body with. It's also expensive, and it can be difficult to use, and boy does it looks fantastic, right? I'm getting pretty close there. All right. I know this is the longest part of the video, is just watching this done. Okay, so now when I get to the front, what I want to do is I want to bring it all the way up to my thread, which you want your thread right at where you started. And then what I'll do is I'll take my floss, I'm going to wrap it and bring it forward to be in front of my thread. And as I come up and around, I can position it like this. I will wrap over the floss and back so that the floss is sitting on top, and it helps with this little angle that I have here. And then once I have 2 or 3 turns into the back, I can come in and trim that out. Put a couple more in, and you can wrap forward just a little bit to help keep your thread from wanting to scoot and slide down over the eye. I want to readjust my hook so that my hook eye is angled up just a fuzz. That seems to really help. Okay, next what we're going to do is we're going to get our tinsel, and I'm going to pull it so that it's parallel with the hook shank running forward. And then for this, you can really come over the top from here, or you can bring it down and around and come underneath. You just want to make sure that the gold part, or the gold side, is facing the body. And as the goal here is to get between 5 and 7 turns in, evenly spaced. If you have a rotary function, you can whip finish up front there and just get your angle on your mylar and just have at it. Whip that thing around a little bit. I don't mind just taking my time to bring it up and over and around. Okay. Now once I have that caught in, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to fold the mylar up and over itself towards the back, and I'm going to wrap with touching wraps going back into it. And I didn't count them, but I should have about 7 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, well, I'll take 8. Usually it's between 5 and 7, but that's okay. Evenly spaced is what we're shooting for. So something like that. Next, we're going to put in the throat, and for that, I like to use just the fluff down here off of a saddle, a yellow saddle. You could also use marabou. You could just get a new piece of marabou and line your tips up, tie it in underneath, right? But I like to use the fluff off of this. Just think it's nicer. I can usually get it to line up a little bit better. I can pinch it off and get the right amount, not have to mess with something so big as a piece of marabou. Now I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch off of here, and what I want there to be more than just a 1/2 inch. So I've got about 1 inch here of width, and I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch. I've got about 1 inch width of the down off the side there. And I'm going to take about a 1/2 inch off the stem. And so the goal here is to have it go back half the length of the hook shank, which is about there, and still have plenty of room to have material to tie in up front. Okay. Now the easy way to do this is to turn your vise over. If you can't do that, then you can bring it up and down and around your thread like so and tie it in. And since I've already done that, I'll just stick with it. Otherwise, you can just turn your vise over, place it where you need it, and tie it in that way. And I'm going to tie this in with touching turns going forward. I'm going to get about 3 or 4 in there. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to trim out everything on the front side. Before I tighten it all the way down, this is my chance to make sure it's all sitting where I want. It's running about even and starting in the same place up both sides. You don't want it to go really too far above the halfway point. I like it at the halfway point and down from either side. Right here I'm kind of hugging just underneath, except for this one little piece right there. That's not a big deal. But when it gets wet, it's not going to matter a whole lot, but you do want to, for dressing purposes, you want to try to make it as even as possible. I'm going to wrap my thread forward until I've got about a half to 1 bodkin width left behind the eye. And now I'm going to wrap back. Just trying to get all this wrapped up and hidden. And looks like I need to go just one more time. And doing this, as long as your thread's open, you're actually helping to build the head right now. So doing this isn't such a bad thing. You can see the head's already starting to form on the fly. Next, we're going to put in the wing. And the wing is just a white piece of marabou that I've already taken. I've taken all the fluff off the bottom. I want the same kind of diameter that we had in the front, or on for the tail. So when I pull it all together, it takes up about 1/3 to a half of the gap. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to get the marabou wet. And once I have it wet, I'm going to pull it through my fingers like this. Now you'll see that there's a natural curve to the feather. So we want this curve facing down. So that's the concave side. We want the concave side facing down. I'm going to kind of just, with my fingers, since they're a little wet, I'm going to add that to the tail for just the moment. Now I can place it right where I want it. You can take this out as far or short as you want. You do want your wing to sit over your tail. I like to sit over just a little bit, ½ inch maybe, 1/4 inch, something like that. So once you have it where you want it and you're happy, you're just going to pinch up right next to your thread, and we're going to put, with open thread, flat thread, we're going to put 2 turns in. And then this is kind of your, I'm just adding gentle pressure so it doesn't move. This is kind of your final test to look it over before we start moving forward. Now I'm going to start wrapping forward. With each turn, I'm going to add just a little bit of tension to the thread. Once I get about halfway or so, I'm going to lift this up. I'm going to come in with my scissors. I like to run my scissors right along with the top of the eye. I'm going to cut that out. So now I've got a little bit of a taper to it. And again, with each turn as I go around, I'm going to tighten this thread up, adding more and more pressure, starting to bend it down. If you trim your marabou off too quick in the back, it can want to slide off of the cut end, and just like it did there. If it does that, just gradually work the front part of your taper until you can start working back onto it. Okay. Now I'm going to work it to the back, and I'm going to bring it back forward. Something about like that'll work. I'm going to grab the whip finisher, put in 3 or 4 right behind the eye. Pull it tight. I don't like to snap my thread off on this. It can fray. I do like to trim that off with my scissors or some cuticle clippers even. And that's it. So if you want to secure the head, you can use some super glue. You could use some black fingernail polish, black lacquer, clear nail polish. I'm just going to use some UV resin here. I'm just going to put a drop right on top. Don't need a whole lot. And I'll take my bodkin and start to move it around to help shape the head. Get it all covered up. If you're going to use like a nail polish or a lacquer or something that doesn't dry quickly, you really want to consider having a place for this to dry, and or keeping this in the vise long enough so that you can rotate it to keep from the whatever your sealant is from pooling and creating a little bubble in there, which can look kind of funky and it can be a pain to take off, or just damage the fly or whatever. So try to avoid that. So now that I've got that, started to pool in one area there. That's pretty good. Now I can come in and I'll zap it with my UV light. I'll give it a second and shoot it again. But that's it. It's the Marabou Black Ghost. It's a fun little pattern to tie. It's a great pattern, or a great pattern to learn to tie if you're looking to get into more of the nicer salmon flies. It's a good starting point for that. So, hope you liked the video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Always feel free to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that when you do. You can check us out over at Fly Tying for Beginners on Facebook. We do classes. This is actually a video for one of the classes that we're doing over there. Yeah, so hopefully I'll answer the questions at the Facebook group, and that gets you in. Yeah, happy tying. We'll see you later.